Okay, so good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Career Skills Masterclass from Beginning to End, How to Start and Leave Your Job, featuring Katrina Mateo and Avery Bowser, and this is hosted by the Career Skills Academy and the Office of Career Services. My name is Taylor, and I'm the Career Skills Academy Program Manager here at CUNY SPH. And if you're not familiar with the Career Skills Academy, it is a soft skills and professional development program that we offer to our students here at CUNY SPH. If you have any questions about it or want to learn more, feel free to reach out to me at any time. We also have our final workshop of the semester this Thursday, May 9th at 12 p.m. And the topic is What Hiring Managers Want, featuring Daniel Green. So I will share the registration information in the chat later on if you're interested. So I know we have a few people joining still, but I will now introduce tonight's speakers, Katrina and Avery. Katrina Mateo is a public health trained researcher, interventionist, and strategist. Her work leverages human-centered design thinking, systems thinking, behavioral science, and implementation science to drive innovation, optimization, and meaningful impact in clinical trials, digital health research, and public health initiatives. In her current role at REGENERON Pharmaceuticals, she is responsible for identifying, evaluating, evangelizing, coordinating, and leading innovation opportunities to optimize clinical development operations, speed, and efficiency. Previous to this role, she assessed and implemented digital endpoint and biomarker technologies and studies across multiple therapeutic areas, as well as drove strategic initiatives to improve clinical trial operations and processes, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and patient experiences. Her early career in medical academic settings and research consultancy focused on developing novel digital health behavior change interventions, as well as evaluating novel digital health technologies and solutions. Katrina received her PhD in public health from the CUNY Graduate School of Public Health and Health Policy, her MPH degree from the Columbia University Mailman School of Public Health, and her BA in biology from Vassar College. She is currently pursuing an MBA through the Boston University School of Business. Avery Bowser is the Director of Strategy and Innovation at MJHS, one of the largest not-for-profit health systems in New York City. She previously served as Director of Operations at Stellar Health, a value-based care tech startup. As the first operations employee at Stellar Health, she led team development, management, and customer performance. Avery also has professional experience in the healthcare, research, and digital marketing industries. Avery holds a Master of Public Health Policy and Management from CUNY SPH and a Bachelor of Science in Public Relations from Syracuse University's Newhouse School of Public Communications. She is a current graduate student in the Mental Health Counseling Program at Hunter College. So welcome, Katrina and Avery. We are so pleased to have you with us tonight, and I will now turn it over to both of you.
Great, thanks so much. Really excited to be here, and I know everyone's in different places and different in not sure what your context might be in at home, but feel free at any point if you feel comfortable to put your videos on. We'd always love to see your faces, and definitely keep an eye on the chat. We'd love to kind of get people's thoughts. We might kind of plug in a couple questions just to kind of hear from all of you as well, because all of us have started jobs, left jobs, and so it'd be really great to hear from all of you as well, not just hear from us. Yeah, Avery, anything you want to say before we get started?
No, I think you covered all the intros, and thanks, Taylor, for the nice introduction. Looking forward to this conversation tonight, everyone.
Great. So to start, we thought we would just, begin with a very easy question. We're going to put in the chat. Feel free to type. We didn't set it up as polls, but feel free to just type in the chat. How many jobs have you had, started, and left? Just wanted to get a sense from the attendees here, kind of what that range is. We'll give it like 15 seconds. So we just type a number. How many jobs have you had, started, and left? It's crying up to 3, 4. How many others? 2. Okay. Okay, good range here. From 1 to 4 jobs. Anyone has had more than 4? Okay. Avery, how many have you started and left?
I was calculating before we started this call. So full-time positions, I've been at, I think it was either 5 or 6 companies. But then, while getting masters, I did part-time research jobs and fellowships. So when you count all of that, I think I've started and left, around 8 places.
Same thing about full
Yeah.
time, or like 4 or 5, and then you add everything about 8. So I think we're about at the same spot. So, all right. So it looks like we have a good range of number of jobs that people have started and left. So it looks like at least everyone has had some experience, at least starting a job and definitely leaving a job. So it's really great. Would love to hear people's thoughts at some point in terms of their experiences. Um, how we wanted to think about this is starting and leaving your job, right? There's a lot that goes into it, and there's a lot of different experiences, things that go along with what it means to start and end. And we wanted to kind of hone in on maybe 4 main kind of concepts, ideas as we kind of talk through and share our thoughts. And so if you take away anything from this conversation, it would be probably these 4 things when it comes to starting and leaving a job. And so the first one is around integrity and preparedness. And I think you could probably get a sense of why that's a main concept when you think about starting a job. The second is around relationships. I think that's also a very obvious one, why it's important, and we'll talk about a little bit. Professional goals, professional personal goals, how that relates to starting and leaving a job. And then the last one's around mental health, which may not seem as obvious on why, but when you think about all of the sort of emotions and psychological factors, right, that go into starting and ending a job, it starts to make a little more sense why mental health is actually a big factor when it comes to starting and ending a job. So just wanted to anchor those 4 concepts, and we'll kind of talk through different parts of that. So maybe we'll start with integrity and preparedness and starting a job.
Let's do that.
So let me just pull this up. If you see me looking this way, I have some notes on the side, so I'm not just trying to look away from all of you. So day 1, let's say you have landed your dream job, okay? And it is the couple days before, night before your day 1. Actually, let's start with an easy one. Let's put in the chat. What are some feelings that you have the night before you start your first job, or you start the day 1 of a job? What are some of those feelings, emotions that you have? Okay, your anxiety, excited, excited. Okay. What else? What are other feelings that you might have? Pumped. Okay. What other emotions, states of mind are people experiencing? Okay. Anxiety, uncertainty. So for all things that I know I felt, Avery, have you felt these?
Yeah, the uncertainty gets me, like a little apprehension, what exactly is this gonna be like?
Any others? Nervousness. Okay. Okay, so I'm seeing a mix of excited, pumped, uncertainty, nervousness. So let's talk about how we deal with these. So definitely, I would say, I guess, Avery, let's start with you. So in thinking about some of these sort of positive, I won't say positive, but these types of emotions that are around excitement, being pumped, and kind of looking forward to it. So kind of, is there an experience that you can share where you've felt that? How have you handled it? How has that translated into your first day?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think with sometimes excitement and nervousness go hand in hand, right? You chose this job for a reason. There are things that attracted you to it, and you want it, and you're looking forward to seeing what that's going to be like. But there is, this fear of change and fear of the unknown. And some things that I, like to do in advance to prepare for that is see what I can learn going into day 1. So whether that's, sometimes I'll reach out, to a future employer and ask if they have any pre-reading or any information about the team or anything they want to send me in advance, so I can kind of get to know folks before I start. So when I get there on day 1, I have a little bit of my bearings already. I know, who I'm supposed to meet with, what we're going to be focusing on, and things like that. And I also just like to remind myself that, everybody on here has had, it seems like, multiple experiences joining and leaving jobs. So you've been the new person, but you've also probably been that more tenured person. And so just reminding yourself that all this is temporary, and you're new for a little bit, and then before you know it, it's like you've been there for a while.
No, I love that point. I think all of us experience some level of anxieties and nerves from starting anything new, right? That's going to happen. I think one of the, a good best practice in handling some of those jitters or nervousness is how can you best be prepared, right? Hopefully at this point, you've researched the company, you've looked into who your supervisor is going to be, who your team is going to be, who are your colleagues, what is the culture. I think all of that goes into this practice of being as prepared as you can. Obviously, you won't know everything on day one, week one, month one, probably a couple months, and you will still not know everything, right? But it's good to try to do as much as you can to be prepared, right? And that hopefully may help with some of those early first day, first week, first month anxieties. Other tips, Avery, in terms of dealing with some of those anxieties, nervousness when starting?
Yeah, I think, it also helps to, once you're there, right, past day one, is if you can, sit down with your supervisor or manager, whoever it is. And at least for me, something that helps with the anxiety is having a sense of where things are going. At least, you can't have control a lot of times if things are going to change all the time on a job, and that's what makes it interesting and keeps it interesting. But getting a sense of, if you can ask them, what are the expectations for my first 30 days? What is this going to look like? And just getting a sense of that, that can definitely help me. And also talking to people, asking them about their stories, how they dealt with it when they started.
Love those. And if it helps, I'll type some of those into the chat just to help ground some people in some of these best practices. But I love what you said, Avery, about getting a sense of what are the expectations, what are the major priorities of the role and company. And you really only learn that, yes, partially from the job description, but also setting up those one-on-ones, right, with the people that you work with, the person who's going to be your primary supervisor, getting those kind of one-on-one times and relationships started. We go back to one of those concepts that we highlighted earlier, building relationships, right? That is a very critical, I think, best practice when starting, because at the end of the day, you're probably not going to be working completely alone, completely independently, right? You want to learn from other people who've been there before you, either for a short amount of time, a long period of time, but that's how you learn the culture, learn the priorities, and you do that through meeting people. So definitely love those practices as well. I think another one that I know for me, it helps myself when I am starting a new job is I'm very much a paper pen person. I do love digital, but I do find that it helps me personally retain information when I actually write things down. And so best practice that I kind of depend on is having like a notepad, or at least some type of program on my laptop or on my device where I can actively take notes during those one-on-ones, during those team meetings, right? It helps me stay engaged, it helps me write down important things that I know I'm going to forget because I have a memory of a goldfish. And so things I can get back to, remember. And it's also a way to signal to other people that you're paying attention, that you're engaged, that you're invested in what others are saying during those meetings. So I would add that as a best practice, as well as, just to take notes and practice active listening as much as you can.
Katrina, that's a great point, and it reminded me of something else that I've done, at least at the last 2 companies I've joined. Folks on the line probably are familiar. There's a lot of acronyms in the healthcare space, and a lot of times when I've joined a new company, it's like they're speaking a language that, I don't entirely understand. So especially in those early meetings, I find I write down any acronyms, any terms, things that folks mention that, it doesn't feel like the right time necessarily to disrupt the whole meeting and ask, but I know I want to know this, and then I'll bring it to my boss after the fact in our next one-on-one, or I'll Google it. And for my last 2 jobs, I actually have like my own tracker of acronyms that then I've been able to give to new hires who join after me and say, this is a little library. This is how this is the lingo we use here. It might be confusing, but here's my resource. And that's been helpful.
Absolutely. And I see it comments, I like to know details. So doing this, yep, absolutely. One of the things that I actually my most recent role, because where I work right now, REGENERON is a very large company. It's the largest company that I've worked with. And I had to just make sense of all the divisions, the teams, the structure, the hierarchy. And I started making my own like chart of people as I met them and kind of what their role is. Because sometimes the title of someone doesn't necessarily explain what they actually do and why you would necessarily go to them. So helping to have some way to chart for yourself and for your own understanding, who's the person to go for this, who's the person to go for that, who has been here the longest and understands this topic, or how to get access to XYZ, right? Keeping that list very helpful, especially when you're starting. Another one in terms of starting a job is, and I've seen this. Yeah, I'll tell a little story. So in our program at REGENERON, we have a robust internship program. So side note, around the fall time, look for internships for major companies because they start as early as the fall. But I remember on day one of the summer when all the interns had started, and a lot of them are sitting around the room, some of them are on Zoom, and there was one person who just kept yawning and kind of nodding off during orientation in front of multiple chairs, right? There were also people who just kept looking all over the room and kind of zoning out. It was just very apparent. And obviously there are sort of many reasons that where people may be distracted in other cases, but I think a best practice is try to stay engaged and attentive, especially during orientation, right? A lot of that comes down to first impressions and demonstrating to the people who hired you or brought you on that you're excited, right? Even if you're nervous, even if you're distracted, show enthusiasm, especially in those early days, so that people feel good about the fact that they brought you in. They chose you for a reason to start in this job, to start in this internship. And so you want to say, yes, like I am excited, I am passionate, I'm looking forward to doing this job that I was hired to do. So kind of keep that in mind about just being present, being engaged. Yeah, add that to the chat. Be present and be engaged.
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly, Katrina. I feel like a lot of these kind of more recent points too have hit on a little bit of the relationship component, and how important that is really at all stages of the journey, but certainly when you're first starting a job. And I think we've hit on some of the key things there, like getting to know your peers, your boss, anyone else on your team, folks that you'll be working with the most, and just how important that is. At the last multiple companies that I've joined, when I first started, I asked, who are the folks that I'm going to be working with the most? Can I set up, an introductory one-on-one with them to learn what do they focus on, what keeps them up at night, what's most important to them, how do they best envision us working together? And I found that that's been really helpful. It helps me learn more about the company, especially if you're at a bigger multi-departmental company. It's a really good way to interview a bunch of people. But also it sets you up right from the beginning, with connections with folks you're going to work with.
Great question. Actually, as a reminder, if you have questions as we go through this, feel free to type in the chat. We'll try to answer as many questions as possible. Leslie, are there any recommendations on building relationships in remote roles? Excellent question. Avery, did you start a role during the COVID pandemic? Were you onboarded?
I wasn't onboarded, but I onboarded a bunch of people
Okay.
during the pandemic. And so, I mean, we had very frequent one-on-ones virtually, and we actually had it was a fast growing company, and we had this it was kind of an app, a plugin for Slack. It was called Donut, and each week you'd get matched up randomly. So in addition to all the one-on-ones you'd be doing with your employer, with your peers, once a week you'd kind of get matched with somebody new on a, I'd I was in
Oh, that's cool.
I'd get matched with an engineer and we'd talk for 30 minutes. So that was a really nice feature that they implemented, which of course you don't need an app to do. You could do that organically too. But
It can be challenging though, right? And I think there are methods digitally that kind of can help with meeting new people, but it is definitely a challenge when you're remote, where you have to rely on kind of creative ways to meet people. I think for me, I was onboarded to Regeneron August 2020. So right early, generally relatively early pandemic, people didn't really understand how to best onboard people. And I would say that it does take a little more effort and intentionality, right? You don't have the same walk-bys, right? If you're in an office setting or if you're in a building where you can pass by people's offices, you see their name, they may have name tags or teams are all huddled together. So you kind of have to be a little more intentional. And so if your company has a type of directory of employees, or you get a list of who is on your team, reach out to them, be proactive, introduce yourself, say, hey, I just joined yesterday, in the last week, in the last month, would love to learn about what you do here, and and introduce myself, right? I think it does take more intentionality to prompt those meet and greets, as we call them, those one-on-ones. And then building the relationships, just like with in-person relationships, right, takes time and effort. So have that first one-on-one, but don't let that be your last one-on-one, right? The same way that you might have a colleague in the office where you swing by on the way to the copier or to print something or to go get lunch, right? Ping people. Usually most companies have some method of chat, right? Whether it's through Google or Zoom or Teams or Slack or whatever, ping people, say like, hey, how are you doing? How was your weekend? Right? The same way you would organically build relationships in person, find ways digitally to connect, to acknowledge, right? To reach out and build those relationships. Yeah, no, that's a great question, and definitely challenging in remote roles. Oh, good question, Avery. How do you build work relationships without oversharing about your personal life? That's a good one.
this is such a good question. Should I go?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Great question. I think it's a fine balance. I've also definitely experienced this as a people manager where, I want to get to know and connect, but kind of also maintain like being appropriate. I think it can vary per person. Personally, I think there is room for being personal and getting to know and caring about the people that you work with without it, crossing any sort of line, and knowing what's comfortable and off limits to you. I talk to my employees about, their pets or their family, or ask somebody how their weekend was and they can share what they want to share. You don't have to ask any prying or specific questions, but just kind of by asking an open, non-pressure question, and then somebody else can see where they want to take it from there. But I like to spend, the first 5 to 10 minutes of a meeting, depending if it's 30 or 60 minutes, kind of on the personal. How are you? How are you feeling? How was your weekend? How's that book you've been reading? So just so folks feel like that they're actually, cared about as people, and we're not just cogs in a wheel immediately getting to all the work stuff.
Absolutely. And I think it's also important to be sensitive to how comfortable other people are, right? Or sharing. You don't want to necessarily be the person in the group that is constantly giving tons and tons of details, like down to the minute details of everything that you did right on Saturday and Sunday, right? Gauge kind of from the conversation from people, how much people are willing to share, and also recognize for yourself what you're willing to share, right? You first and foremost have to feel comfortable about it, right? For myself, when people ask what I did over the weekend, right, I make a decision whether I want to share that I, went to church, right? Or that I had a housewarming with all of my family, or that I was working on a difficult, project that was outside of work, that, you that kind of have to make a decision for yourself, what you feel comfortable talking about. But there are some things that, in general, everyone can share about. And I think if you mentioned like books you might be reading or things you're doing with your family, especially if you like go see your parents or if you go out, with your kids somewhere, if you're going to see a movie recently, right? There's a lot of topics that are sort of low hanging fruit. I hate, it's a corporate term, whatever, but things that are easy to bring up in conversation that people can easily react to. Great. I love that there's questions coming in. I appreciate it. Okay, how do you learn about your team without being labeled / judged? So this is an interesting one because, and if it's okay, I'll start on this one because I've been both on the side of managing a team and also being on a team where I'm more of an independent contributor. I really believe that it is everyone's responsibility to create a psychologically safe environment, right? And unfortunately, that's not always the case. That not every working environment has that, right? But if there is a space where the director, the head, the supervisor has created that environment, right, then hopefully everyone on the team can maintain and support the type of environment where people can share without fear of being labeled or judged, right? And unfortunately, part of that is also sort of testing the waters, right? So I, may not, divulge, all the details about kind of going on, a retreat, right? For example, with church, I might just like hang out with people to, and we kind of talked about our life. We're keeping it general, right? But then you're able to over time develop those relationships, assess if you're able to feel comfortable sharing more details, and also get, earn and assess trust that you have with other colleagues. But that is something that I think takes some sort of nuanced learning and assessment, and it takes time, and it's also it's risky, right? You're putting yourself out there to a certain degree, and that's where it's important to judge for yourself kind of levels of depth, right, to what you share. Avery?
No, absolutely. I agree. I agree with everything you said, Katrina. I frankly don't think I have that much to add, but I do think for, people in supervisory or leadership roles, like the responsibility definitely falls on those individuals too, to make sure that it's a culture and environment where people are comfortable, and they can be themselves and share without fear of being judged.
Absolutely. Quick show of hands. I don't know if everyone can use the reactions button. If you can, I don't know, put a thumbs up. Who has heard of individual development plans or growth plans, or had to create one, or ask their team members to create one? Has anyone done anything like that? Okay, I see a thumbs up. I see one. Anyone else have heard of IDPs, growth plans, goal setting in the job place? Okay, I'm seeing 1, 2. I see a thumbs down as well. Okay, awesome. Very, very honest. I love it. Okay. So okay, a couple thumbs up. Oh, my friend got one this week from a okay. So I think it's important to differentiate between kind of growth plans, goal setting versus IDPs that are used as a way to kind of flag performance. I think there are differences between those two. I would just comment that when starting a job, right, it is important to think about your own growth goals, right? When you are starting a new job, ideally, right, you're starting this job because you believe it's going to lead to your growth as a professional, right? So I think one of the key things when starting a job is listening, well, what are the goals that I want to achieve in the first 6 months, in the first year, in the first, in that, early period of time, as a way to ground yourself on what you want to get out of this role, right? So there is a sort of like personal professional growth plan for yourself as a reminder. And then there are things that are called IDPs, or there's other names for them, individual development plans, that can be used by managers as a way to help focus in on areas that perhaps can benefit from a little more attention, right? If, let's say, there is a growth area or opportunity that your manager sees, they may work with you to come up with a plan to improve in that area or to grow in that area, right? It can be related to an evaluation of your work, but not always, right? I will say that, IDPs can sometimes be used as like an early flag for kind of evaluation in a more formal way. But I would say in the context of starting a job, it's always good to have some type of development plan for yourself. And that's something you can also co-develop with your supervisor or your manager as a way of just showing, I want to grow in this role. I want to achieve in this role, right? And it's also helpful to then go back to and update your resume with on projects that you've completed, things that you've achieved, skills that you've learned, right? So I would say there may be some fears around IDPs, but I think if you flip it and see it as, how do I document that I've achieved, that I've grown, right? So hopefully that answers some of the questions that came up there. Avery, in your experience in that area of setting goals or growth plans.
Yeah, yeah. So actually at a job that I started not quite recently anymore, but it's kind of a newer, smaller team and a little bit more ambiguous, and we do annual reviews, but I'm used to kind of getting more frequent feedback and things like that. So at, 90 days, 3 months, I asked my manager, could we have a 90-day check-in? It doesn't have to be anything formal. You don't have to put, hours and put it into a clean template. I just want to know at this stage, how do you think I'm doing? Am I meeting your expectations? What are our goals? And we were able to have that conversation from my prompting, which was definitely helpful because I felt like I didn't necessarily know how I was doing, and it was good to get that feedback. So ask, a lot of companies are great about proactively setting that up, but if not, absolutely ask.
Goals for growth. Yeah, I'm going to add that in as a best practice when you start a job. Set your personal/professional goals for growth, right? Those 30, 60, 90 days. Have a plan for yourself, work with your manager. And I see that this comment about how, you were looking at your role and you wanted to pivot. That's great. And I think a great manager, a great supervisor should be open and supportive to your growth, right? That's part of their responsibilities. And so if you want to contribute in a different way, you want to stretch yourself in a different way in your role, it's important to voice that, right? That's part of professional growth. And if there's a way to pivot or to expand on your job description to do more, that's great, because then that means that also the company will probably retain you for longer because now you're being challenged, right, in new ways. No, that's great. I love that people are sharing kind of from their own experiences as well. Please keep doing that. Any other questions related to starting a job? Kind of those early phases when you first start. Is there a source on form or scale in which we can customize for a need or role? If you feel comfortable, actually, Avery, is there a source and format or scale on which we can customize for a need or role? If you feel comfortable, do you want to just maybe clarify a little bit on what you mean by that? Is there?
Yeah, sure, Katrina.
Yeah.
First of all, thank you. This is very helpful. So what I was asking was, this is new for me. I'm from different culture, different country, and everything, and I'm trying to understand how Western culture works. Here you have very different culture than my country. So when I first time when I went in for a job and I was getting orientation and I was talking to my manager, there were certain things I was not aware of that I should be asking or like I should be know about. And my manager may or may not have been taking that seriously. So it ended up like at the end, I got a feedback from the department head that you should have been supervising your own supervisor, or like you should have your own plans, and then we should have reciprocated how it went well or your supervisor was
Right.
achieving it or not. So now when I'm looking back at the positions, I would like to be aware, like, there are certain things you customize, but there are certain things if you have something base, you can actually build on it.
Yeah,
That's what I would.
absolutely. Got it. Yeah, so hopefully when you start, whether it's a part-time, full-time, internship, fellowship, job, full-time job, hopefully there's a job description, and sometimes it's very thin, sometimes it's very robust, right? Regardless of how detailed it is, I think it's always a good idea to get that alignment and clarity with your supervisor to confirm and align that, is this accurate? What more are you expecting. I want to make sure that I am successful, especially in the first 30, 60, 90 days. And I want to check in with you to make sure that we're in alignment of what you expect from me, and what I expect from you, right, as a supervisor. So I think if there's a JD job description, start there. And if not, then, I would suggest working with your manager to build one, because, as an employee, or as an intern, or whatever role or job, right? It's a contract. You have a contract with your employer to achieve certain things, to contribute in a certain way, and they have a contract with you to set expectations so that you can be measured against some sort of expectations, right, and responsibility. So I would say to go to the JD or align with your manager from understanding your question. Avery?
Katrina, I agree with both. A job I started, I worked at a startup. I started that job in 2019, and there was no job description. It was a new company, it was a young company. And before I agreed to sign on, I said, can you write me a job description? And these things evolve, they're going to change. Was my role very close to that job description even 6 months in? Maybe not, but having that clarity. And something else you said, you said you had the conversation with your department head, and that's something I've done in another job is, I've asked a boss before, what are your metrics for success for me? At the end of the year, if these are our 3 most important projects, where do these projects need to be in order for us to be successful? And sometimes I've actually she wasn't able to answer that question, but then I've asked from her boss's perspective. I've said, I'm going to make up a name. Okay, but what does Charles think we have to do to be successful? And then I've actually gotten an answer. So that could be another way to go about it. If your immediate supervisor isn't as sure, maybe asking them what they think is responsible.
That is definitely, I think, great feedback. And I think before we switch to leaving your job, I would add that, your immediate supervisor, manager, boss, department head, right? Yes, they may have a role in terms of, assessing and evaluating, growing, but they don't have to be your only source of mentorship or guidance, right? I would actually highly suggest within sort of that early period of starting a job that you identify folks that you can see learning from, that you can see going to for advice, you can see maybe shadowing them at some point. I think there was a question that may have come in previously. Can you ask for training or to shadow someone? Like, seek out those people. When you do those one-on-ones, take notes. Oh, actually, I really love this person's professional trajectory, and I want to learn how they got to where they went, right? And maybe set up a monthly check-in with them, right? To kind of, have them share their experiences or learn. So kind of be open to not always relying on a single person, right? To be your manager and mentor and, friend and guide and all of those things, right? There hopefully will be other people on your team, in your company, at your firm, that you can go to for all those different reasons. So if it's okay, maybe we'll pivot a little bit. Now, assuming that everyone has had a very fabulous, successful first 30, 60, 90 days, you're doing the job, you're doing the work, you're delivering, you are meeting those metrics, you have had great evaluations, or maybe not, right? Because everyone has different experiences with their jobs. And at some point, right, we will all experience or have experienced leaving a job. So what I would love to pose to the group is, and feel free to chat, is what is the reason why you've left a job? How you know that it was time to go? Because I know everything I heard ranges from 1 to 4 or 5 different jobs. So everyone has left a job at some point. So would love to hear from people. What is the reason you left a job? In like a sentence. Okay, low pay, not a great manager. Outgrew where you were working. Yep. Changing career paths. Great. What else? New opportunity. Ooh, okay, I feel that one so deeply. When you wake up in the mornings and you feel no motivation at all, I feel that so deeply. No longer feeling challenged, not being appreciated. Yes, limited growth opportunities, finished your major project, that you were assigned, underpaid and stressful. Yes, I love this. Everyone, I think, can relate to at least one of these. And I think kind of going through these reasons, it's a mix of pay, right? So financial reasons, relationships, if you have not a great relationship with your manager, things related to your professional growth. If you feel like you have outgrown a place, you're changing career paths, all of these things, yes. And not feeling motivated is a signal, right? To not feeling challenged or not feeling psychologically safe, right? Feeling undermined, yeah, that's a challenging position to be in, right? All of these reasons, yep. Burned out, not enough work-life balance. Yeah, so I think everyone has had that experience of feeling something, right? It's something that you feel in your body, in your soul, in your mind, that it's time to go, right? So what do we do? What happens? Avery, I'm sure you've left jobs, I've left jobs. What happens when you start feeling this way? It's and any of these reasons that people have cited. What have you done?
I know, and these reasons are great. I think I've left a job for many of these reasons. I thought of it. But I think the first thing that happens if I start to feel these feelings is, I really explore them and I give it some time and I sit with it. I think about the pros and cons. I think, did I have a bad day and a really bad meeting? And is this an impulsive thing? Or is this a repeat thing? Is it something that I think I can fix and stay at this company? Let's say you feel like your growth is stagnant. Is there another role or another team or a promotion that I could work for to stay within this company? Maybe I just have a different interest and shift, or is it really fully just time to move on? And assessing that, thinking about, is there something else that you want to do that's differently? But that's really the first thing I think, is just really kind of get curious and explore those initial feelings. And sometimes it takes time. Sometimes you might mull over leaving for months, years before you do. And that's okay. I've never regretted the pace at which, I've decided to leave.
Absolutely. I 100% agree, because I think for all of these reasons, right, some of them may be solved by having a conversation, right, with your supervisor. If you're not feeling fulfilled, right, is there a way that I can pivot what I'm working, or maybe, split the percentage on what you're working on and on different projects in a different way so that you can feel more fulfilled in a certain area. If you're, if some of these others, or if you're feeling undermined or maybe psychological unsafe, like those actually might be reasons to actually either report or go to HR or go to some of your company to actually talk through some of these, right? To protect yourself, right? Those are also very legitimate actions, right? That can be taken if that happens. If you're outgrowing the role and you feel comfortable, are there other opportunities in your company, right? Because we also know that there's a trade-off sometimes to starting a new role, right? Is there other opportunities? Is another job? Check the job postings of your company if there's a department or group that you can switch over to. I think all of these are potential actions that you can take while you're at a job, but then you're starting to think about leaving, right? And I think, as Avery, as you said, it can take a couple of weeks, it can take months, it can take years for people to decide to leave, but there's no right or wrong timeline to that. I think it's important, and I typed it, is to reflect on why you want to leave your job. So let's assume that you've decided, okay, well, I want to go for all the reasons, or any of these reasons, I want to leave. Well, what do we do now? And I've reflected on it. I've made the decision. I want to leave. What happens? What happens next? Avery, what have you done? Once you're like, okay, it's time to go. What do I do now?
I've done lots of things. I think one of the things that I want to figure out is, sometimes when I've left, I haven't known necessarily what I wanted to do next or where I wanted to be. I just knew that it was time to find something find something new. So part of that is doing some research and exploring what else is out there, looking at job postings, reaching out to people in my network and talking to them and seeing what they're working on and what openings there are. One thing that I like to do if I'm not exactly sure what I want to do next is I've done like debriefs of what are the things about my job right now that I've done that I really like, and kind of analyzing, a bunch of my days and saying this moment in the day I was really energized and excited. Okay. And what's the common theme between all of that? And then looking for roles that have more of that. So that's one of the things, is just trying to get really clear about what I want to do next if I'm not already sure. And activating my network and doing research and updating my resume. Depending on how long you've been at your current job, your resume may have collected a lot of dust and needs some brushing up. So those are some of the immediate things that I do.
I love that. I tap that in, is reflect on what excites you, motivates you, brings you joy when it comes to work, right? At some point, hopefully, you were excited and motivated to do the work you were doing, right? And what was that, right? And how can you find that again, or replicate it, or leverage that, right? To find another role that you might be interested in. And then I think related to that, and I think it's important to underscore this, outside of work, look at what opportunities are available, right? Depending on the timing, it's not the best look for people around you on your current team or your boss to know that you're looking, especially if you're not prepared to state formally that you are leaving, right? So be conscientious of how you're looking, where you're looking, the timing, and when you talk to people about it, just obviously best practice, be mindful about that. But definitely love that point on reflecting on what is important to you, what you want to prioritize. I would also then say, when it comes to actually, leaving, let's say you already have hopefully another job lined up, but even if you didn't, right, if you just want to take some time, one of the best practices, at least for me, that has served me well is having some level of transparency, right, with my team, with my supervisor. And I absolutely agree with that sentiment sometimes. And I have been nervous every single time I've had to write that formal letter or have that one-on-one to say, hey, I have found another opportunity, or hey, I've, I wanted to start a PhD program, and so I can't be working this and doing that at the same time. So the timing is going to change. And I'm letting you know. I think it's part of relationships in maintaining that network, right? I think more often than not, the network that you're in is much smaller than you think it is. So it's always best practice, as much as possible, to not burn bridges, right? Even if you haven't had the greatest relationship, I think there are ways to gracefully leave a job without burning the whole place down and burning every relationship that you've created in your role. So for me, what I've always done is, at least before I have that conversation with my supervisors, to list, well, what have I gained in this role, right? What have I achieved? What am I thankful for in this role? Because hopefully you've been able to accomplish something, right? It's been a stepping stone to something else. So documenting that and bringing that up when you have that conversation or you write that letter, it was always helpful to put that in. It kind of has a positive spin on it.
I think that's a really good point, Katrina, and something that I definitely try to do as well when I leave a company, is, that you definitely got something from it, even if it wasn't always the best experience. And, all of my former bosses are the folks that I reach out to when I need a reference or I need a recommendation at a new company or something. So those relationships, they're very important. Like Katrina said, it can be just a really small industry, and you never know when your paths will cross and you'll work together again. But also, these working relationships are really helpful, and I've been able to maintain nice relationships with former employers.
And references are very important, because
Yes.
in every job you leave a digital, emotional, psychological footprint everywhere you go, right? And where you've worked and who you've worked with follows you. Any new job, they're going to ask for references. They are going to talk to the people you've worked with before because they want to have confidence in who they're bringing in. So, as much as possible, I always say, like, try. And it can be challenging sometimes, especially if you're working with very difficult people or people who undermine you, as someone has mentioned before. You just try your best to leave a good impression, that even if they didn't see eye to eye with you, right, they can at least say that you did your job, that you contributed, that you were a team player, that you helped move the business or move the organization forward or the projects forward, right? That's really important. Oh, sorry, Avery.
No, I was gonna say maybe the same thing as you. I saw Leslie's question,
Yeah, go
which
ahead.
I'm happy to respond to. I have jumped from industries. I studied journalism in undergraduate school and did the first 3 years of my career working in digital media and marketing. I worked at a media agency and then a publisher. And then I pivoted to public health and to healthcare. And I'll say when I first made the change, I remember thinking to myself, oh my gosh, my journalism education wasted, 3 years of working and networking wasted. And it turned out, so not to be the case. In fact, what I found was my skill set from this very different industry was really helpful and such an advantage when I would, apply for internships or talk to folks while I was doing my master's in public health. People would say, oh my gosh, you know how to write, communications. This is amazing. We love this. And so one thing I'll just say is, anything on the path, even if it's a winding path, isn't a waste. All of these skills, they do come into play. They are so much more transferable than they seem. And the rest comes with time. Like, I did build a new network and I did learn more about a new industry. But I was so excited about the subject matter that it was fun when you're making an industry pivot and you're excited about what comes next. That also really helps make it go well.
Absolutely. I've also jumped industries. I think most of my I think really the first 8 years that I worked was mostly in academia, academic medical centers, doing sort of grant-based research projects, building interventions. And I pivoted into private industry, into pharma biotech. There are definitely some transferable skills. And I think it's important when you are transferring industries to think about what are those transferable skills, right? Nothing you've learned, skills you've gained will go unnoticed. It's about thinking how you can best apply it and pivot it into a new environment, right? And those things just make you a stronger candidate, a stronger employee, a stronger supervisor, all those things. So it's definitely possible, and it comes with its challenges, but there is a way, and many people switch industries. And I think actually one of the strengths of having a public health background is that it's actually, in a lot of ways, you are more equipped to change and move between industries than a lot of people who are just trained in a single traditional industry. So I definitely a strength kind of in the being trained as a public health professional. The question, if you're happy with their current position, early grade after self-resign, you decide it's not a good fit. Yeah, no, that definitely happens. Unfortunately, when you start, you thought that this was a perfect fit and it wasn't. And unfortunately, maybe within the first couple of months, hopefully it's, best case scenarios before you actually start. But if it's within kind of that first early 3-month period, that's challenging, right? And I think it's one of those things you have to weigh out whether, like, is there anything you can gain by staying just for a little bit longer, right? Usually best practice is like, you should try to stay within a role for at least a year, right? So that you don't necessarily, other employers don't necessarily see you as a person who jumps from job to job to job, right? But if it's truly not a good fit, if it's truly like there was a mistake or it doesn't align with what you thought it was going to be, I think having a conversation with your HR person, again, being transparent, but also graceful in how you communicate that is important. And you won't always be able to keep, sometimes there may be bridges that we burned. And so you have to accept that might happen if you started a job and left within 3 months, right? They took a chance on you and then you backed out, right? So there's a chance that might happen, but hopefully it doesn't if you kind of figure out how to again, be transparent, honest, but graceful about it. I do want to acknowledge that we have a minute left. So, Taylor, I guess, I don't know if you wanted to, if there was any closing things, or if we wanted to, if there was any other questions, we can give our info if people want to reach out. I wasn't sure if you wanted to kind of cover anything in the last minute.
Sure, yeah. I mean, thank you both so much for being here. This has been such an insightful and great conversation. We can take final questions if there are any. I will be sending out the recording of this workshop to everyone who registered, and if you are open to it, we can include your contact information as well in case people want to reach out to you both.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, I very much appreciate the questions and the engagement. And we're, obviously, I feel free to contact me. I think if you're okay with that as well.
Absolutely.
Feel free to reach out. There's so much that we could talk about and cover, but hopefully this was a good kind of starting point for everyone to think about how to think about these experiences starting and leaving a job.
Yeah, this was great. Thank you both so much. I did put the link in the chat for our final workshop of the semester, which is on Thursday. And thank you everyone for being here tonight. I hope you all have a great rest of your evening.
All right, thanks so much, everyone.
Have a nice night. Thank you, everyone.